Hi, Steve Gilmore. This is the Gilmore Gang, and this is me smiling. On the inside. On the outside, yeah. And by
It's
your
gonna be one
chuckle,
of
Keith, you have sympathy for me?
You know I have sympathy for everyone. Dumb animals, small cats, and you.
Oh, okay. In that order?
Depends on the day of the week. But today, I especially have sympathy for you.
Why is that?
Because you sound like you need it. And I like to give what's needed.
Okay, excellent. Kevin
What do
Marks.
I need, Keith?
No, we'll
What?
get to you in a second.
What do you need? There's this British comedian that goes like this when people ask questions.
That's good. I like that. Kevin Marks, hello.
Hi there.
Who is that British comedian, Kevin, who does that?
Well, it used to be Eric Morecambe, but now
That's
it's
right, Eric Morecambe.
what's his name? Vic Reeves now does that.
Oh, I don't even know who he is.
Morecambe
Eric
and
Morecambe
Wise.
is
I
the one
remember
know.
Wise, right? Morecambe
and Wise, yes. Eric
They
and
were
Eric.
on
Yeah,
that.
all go to YouTube and check out Morecambe and Wise. It's hilarious.
And
But not now, not now. After the show.
and the other voice, no, they can go anytime they want. We're like Google. We're encouraging you to leave.
Unlike Yahoo, it says you will not leave.
John Toshak, welcome.
Good to be here, Steve.
Okay, well that about sums up the news for the week. There's nothing going on. Nice cut.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, it was actually better. What's happening? Anybody have any idea what's going on in the world?
Not that anyone will care, but right now, France is losing to Ukraine 1-0 in the World Cup qualifying playoffs.
Is it a meaningful game? Are they out if they lose?
It's a two-legged game. The first leg is in Ukraine, the second leg in France, and if they lose, they're out of the World Cup.
Oh, man.
And Portugal is tying Sweden, but Greece is hammering Romania.
Okay, well, you were right about that. So, just as we went on the air, or whatever this is, we hear that Ballmer is explaining why he is exiting Microsoft. Maybe I'm an emblem of an older era.
Oh, wow, that's sad.
Maybe?
No,
I reject the notion of older era. I think that's part of his problem, is that he thinks that there's some difference between him and the kids. There isn't.
Yeah, he and I are exactly the same age, I think. I was born in 54. And, it's all about whether you choose to engage with what's happening or whether you try to preserve what happened. It's a choice.
Does anybody want to comment on what I said?
I'm sad for him. I feel sorry for the guy. And I never
yeah.
thought I'd ever say that about Balmer.
I think he's okay. I think
Yeah,
he'll
I think
be
he's
fine.
going to be able to work out.
But your comment is that there is no difference between the
No,
older
that it's a
era and
mistake.
the new
I
era,
think that-
right?
Yeah, well, part of his mistake, I think, is assuming that he is from an old era. I think Bill Gates is from an old era. I don't think that he is. Ballmer's, he's a persistent and very talented salesman. I mean, that never gets old.
I think he does to some extent. I think that is one of the challenges.
Well, what is it that he's not getting about what the kids are saying today?
I wouldn't know. I could go and ask my kids, but it's more that the kind of salesmanship that he's used to is changing, because now everyone can talk to everyone, and that does make a difference in how you sell and how you expect people to behave around technology.
Well,
that is a massive cultural shift.
That's a good.
Microsoft has been the wrong side of.
That's a good point, but everybody has that same problem, and how to deal with it. So, what is why does he think that he doesn't have an understanding of, or that he has a lesser understanding of what needs to be done in this new environment?
I think it's because he very stoutly defended the desktop and PC era. I mean, Gates led the way. It started with the whole Larry Ellison thin client versus thick client debate. And they made the mistake that when smartphones came along, they thought it was the same thing, that it was some superficial thing and that the desktop would prevail. And I think they made a really deep commitment to a platform.
But I mean, they were already, they owned the desktop, so it wasn't like they had a sudden problem of understanding. What are they going to do about it? They own the legacy environment.
Yeah, well, that's
they also
true.
get a lot of money for that.
That's true, but they also created that environment from an era where it didn't exist, so they understand innovation. So all they had to do was, decide to be leaders, not victims. And they decided to be victims. I mean, it was a conscious choice almost. They must have sat around the board table and said, what shall we do? Should we go all in on transformation, or shall we try to preserve what we've got, or both? And I think they didn't even do both. They did a bad job of the future, and arguably quite a decent job actually of preserving their franchises certainly from a dollar point of view.
John Toshik, do you think that they sat around the board table and made a bad choice?
Do I think who made a bad choice?
Microsoft. Do you think they sat around what Keith just said? They sat around the board table and they made a bad choice. Do you think that's what happens?
No. No, it's just a slow-moving company that has a lot of difficulty in positioning for something they know is out there and to get all their arsenal in place. But I think we're overlooking something, is that since over the last year, I don't know when the time frame started. It might have started when Ballmer said he was going to exit Microsoft. It's actually, the stock has been soaring. It's up more than 40%. I mean, it's not like this company's going away. It's doing really well. And everyone's kind of shocked at it, that it's going to overtake Apple in terms of market cap. I think that's boardroom decisions right there, is managing to a shareholder. What's the problem, I think, is that they're not managing to consumer expectations as much as they think they should. And that's where our feeling, our vibes come from, is that they're just not providing any tools for us to do the things that we want to do in a consumer fashion. It's much more stuck in the mud, I'd say.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, except that I'm still stuck on something that Keith said, which is, and I'm paraphrasing obviously since I can't remember 5 minutes ago, something to the effect that they didn't. Well, here's the question. I think there's something going on right now, which is this disruption around apps. That people who think that the web is where it's at, like the guy in the center square today. Hi, Kevin.
Hi there.
Yeah. That people who think that the web is the goal, or that's the victory, that's the prime platform, that's already being deprecated. And I think that Microsoft actually is much more comfortable with the notion of apps than they are with web. They still.
That may be true, but deprecating the web is going to continue to be a mistake, and that's a mistake people have made before. It is the lingua franca, and it needs to be. You need to be there and available on the web as part of the point of being universally available. Microsoft used to be able to just ship stuff on Windows and get away with that, and they can't do that anymore. They need to make sure the stuff is available elsewhere. And when it isn't, they've got this with some things. That's why they built 365 and made some of that stuff available. But they're still, their instinct is the first answer to anything is to we should make this part of Windows or we should make this part of Office, and not we should make this something that's on the web that belongs to that can work everywhere.
I don't want to pick up that debate, but I would say we all remember DLLs, right? Dynamic link libraries. That was the time when Windows began to want to let apps talk to other apps. Predates the web, significantly predates the web. COM objects was the next version, and then ActiveX controls. And
all of them still exist.
And they all still exist. And, that was all about inter-app communications in an app world. And it was it's something that doesn't exist today on mobile. Mobile is actually kind of Windows 3.1-ish in terms of the architecture for apps talking to apps. And the cloud is the only way you can fix that. If all apps talk to the same data in the cloud, like we can all talk to Facebook Connect or to Google login, whatever that is, single sign-on. There's ways to glue apps together at that level, and Facebook and Google are trying to provide that glue, but there's no real app-to-app ecosystem either on Android or on iOS. There's a few attempts to get app URLs, like at just.me we have jm:// as our URI, and it's possible to trigger the launch of our app from another app by calling that. That kind of works, but it's very primitive. You can't pass data between the two apps. So it feels to me as if you
can use intents to pass stuff around.
There's things you can do, but you have to actually hard code the relationship between the two apps. There is no really standard way for inter-app communication to happen very easily. So all I'm really saying is
there is not apps. I mean, you can use ordinary URLs on Android because it actually has sensible URL handling. So you can create an app that says, I understand URLs on the Twitter domain, or I understand URLs on any arbitrary domain, and then the OS will route them to you as well as to anyone else. Now, you've got to make sure that you do actually understand them and behave well with them, but you can do that, which means you can pass URLs back and forth between apps and use them as both as deep linking into the app, but also as being able to render data from other apps if need be.
You'll agree, though, Kevin, won't you, that it's fairly primitive. It's very early. There's a lot more that could be done there. What I'm saying is the scope for innovation on mobile and the DNA that Microsoft has from the past are not actually that separate. The problem is they don't own a platform that anybody wants to buy.
Right.
And these days, if you don't own a platform, you're screwed, no matter...
Yeah, well, I mean, they are definitely screwed, but that doesn't mean that they don't have... a sort of an affiliation or an emotional affiliation with what Apple's doing. That was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, they have no emotional affiliation historically, but I think they've been beaten up now into wanting...
I disagree. I mean, Apple has... I mean, Microsoft were very, very successful at bolting their Office environment onto... first the PC and then next the Mac. I mean, they still sell huge numbers of Office on the Mac.
I see what you're saying.
And they propped up the Mac, when Jobs came back. So there's a subtle kind of relationship there, which isn't doing Microsoft much good at the moment, and it's not really all that important to Apple. But what's interesting to me is that I don't know. It's more of an intuition, as is usual with me. My intuition is that this arena, you want to take that? I can just put you on mute. Just say yes.
No, I don't need to.
Okay. The intuition is that this kind of stitching of this app-to-app environment, I would quarrel with it being app-to-app. I think it's app-to-network. Switching, stitching this stuff together is going to create a lot of user interest. And as a result, it's going to be built out faster than people expect. So I agree with Kevin, although he's talking about Google, I'm talking about the whole environment is going to move very rapidly to something which may not be elegant necessarily, but which is going to work for users more effectively than a simple browser-based environment.
Well, I'm saying it's not just for Google. I'm saying that the best technique we have for this is passing URLs around. That's something that has actually stood up for 20 years and means that you can do inter-app communication in a way that isn't deeply annoying and bound to particular binaries. And that, REST APIs that you fetch stuff from is one manifestation of that. But passing around a URL that means you can get information from a certain place about a certain resource is a pattern that has worked. And
yeah, but I think the larger pattern, you can take the open standards approach, or you can take the browser is the container approach, and I think the pattern is larger than that. The pattern is interacting.
That is the pattern. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you use URLs and RESTful APIs to pass stuff around, you're building something that isn't bound to a browser particularly. It's bound to a particular data model and way of representing things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you can implement that in more than one way. And one of the things that makes doing this on iOS painful is that the platform makes this really hard. So you end up having to do workarounds for it, like creating your own.
I know there are all these
protocols.
really difficult things to do, like making money and stuff like that.
So this is a subtle,
very frustrating.
This is a subtle difference from what Kevin said, but I think it's not URLs, it's URIs. And the difference is URL.
I
means
never understood what that meant anyway.
URL means HTTP.
No, I know what
URI is all the protocols.
No, that's not true. That's right.
It's the Internet of Eyes,
okay.
in other words.
URL means Uniform Resource Locator, which means you actually fetch the URL and get something from the end of it, and you can have multiple protocols in front of that. URIs means you don't know how to fetch it. It's just a token you pass back and forth. So that when you're doing the inter-app communication stuff, where you make up your own arbitrary protocol, like the example you gave, Keith, that is a URI because I don't know how to deal with that protocol.
That's what I mean. But I think that's going to change. I think you're going to learn. There's going to be understood ways to deal with those protocols. You'll remember back in the day there was was it called UDDI that IBM tried to sponsor? It was attempts to describe services that were available at URIs, and it's never really worked.
We've had lots of those, and they tend to collapse under their own weight because the parsing those ends up being harder than parsing what you get by just pulling it and seeing. So you end up having to write meta parsers that are more complicated than the parser you have to write. Which one of the reasons that JSON has won out over SOAP is that it didn't try and do that. It just said, okay, you can parse this stuff really easily. We won't tell you what it means. You can work that out yourself.
Right. So that's where I was going to go, is to JSON. To me, JSON is the glue. Whether it's in the cloud or coming from an app, it almost doesn't matter. JSON is the glue, and the apps are contained within the device. So the browser is not the container anymore. The device or the OS is the container, and the browser is just another app. It is an app. That's what it is. It has access to lots of stuff, but it's just an app.
I turn that round. I say a lot of the apps are just like very limited browsers that can only browse a particular website, and that you've got an app that can only cope with Twitter.com and it can't browse anything else.
Yeah, but
I just want to interrupt this conversation because somebody in the chat room says again all about Microsoft. Thank you. Now back to our all about Microsoft.
This is not all about Microsoft. This is about the future of technology.
So I mean, so there's a tension between
which, by the way, means it isn't about Microsoft at all.
So I was at Dev this week, and there was some interesting back and forth debate about some of this between David Hannemeyer Hansson, who does Ruby on Rails, and some of the other people who are working on Node-based stuff and more JavaScript flavor stuff. And there is a lot of this comes down to is how are you thinking about structuring stuff in the first place. So a lot of these systems, Rails in particular, have an assumption that back behind everything there is a database, and the database is what you're querying, and then you'll turn that into something else for ease of consumption elsewhere. You'll turn it into JSON, or you'll have a thing that turns it into web pages for the web pagey bit. But really, everything is really a database. Whereas the pushback on that is that lots of things don't neatly fit into databases, and actually they're more like documents. So we started out with documents being web pages, and then there was well, if everyone's document, we'll make them more strict and make them to XML. And now there's the notion that big blobs of JSON are the actual document, and then you turn those into web pages. So there's a lot of bickering and back and forth about this, but a lot of this comes down to what is it you're trying to model? Are you trying to model something that is actually breakable into individual pieces that can be constructed as database tables and joined, or are you constructing something that is expressive in its own right, like a web page? And JSON is sort of halfway in between. JSON this is something that is designed to be parsed by a computer, and it has some structure, but it lacks the explicit presentational stuff that HTML has. It lacks the external references that databases have. So a lot of this is still iterating towards trying to find ways to express this stuff in universal formats, and we've got 3 or 4 different attempts of this over time. And the challenge we get is transforming between these models.
First of all, I thought you made perfect sense right up until you said that, and secondly, no. No, it isn't all moving toward universal formats. That is like it's a mirage that's always over the next hill, and it may be what we need to believe in order to be able to move forward, but it never gets there.
Well, no, that's not true. We do have some universal formats.
Like what?
But
at least 2 and probably 10.
Yeah. We the horrible ones.
So what's universal
like
about
Microsoft
that?
Office document format, which is this sort of hideous thing that most of our text is trapped in, and has massive unreliability about getting stuff out of it again.
Well, you just have to have an app for it, right?
But you have to have a specific app from a specific era at Microsoft.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, is Microsoft going to stop that? I mean, if they did, they might actually pull out of their nosedive. But as we discussed a couple weeks ago or last week, the chances of anybody actually saying, enough of us trying to protect Office, let's protect everything else by giving Office away, on the devices that people actually want to use.
But yeah, I mean, the challenge they've got is that they have this model that has worked very well for them, but is predicated on the massive amount of legacy structure they've got. Well, Word document isn't really a data format so much as a sort of history of implementation mistakes now in XML form. And so anybody else making sense of that is guessing at which sub pieces of it you've used. But to some extent, the different versions of Office are doing the same thing. There's a reason everyone has to upgrade Office in Sync, because they suddenly find that documents change layout when they move between them. And the fact that we had that problem with HTML, and we've actually gone through a lot of iteration over the past 5 years to try and make sure that things can look the same between different browsers to a high degree of verisimilitude, which is not something that's happened before. So that I still have confidence in that side, but it doesn't.
Kevin, I was going to say, I think there's a hidden asset that Microsoft has got that they don't focus on to their own detriment, and it's the only really big cross-platform, massive, modern thing that they own, and that is Skype. It would feel to me that closing down Microsoft Messenger was a good move. Skype is actually very decent on iOS. It's very decent on Android. I'm sure it works on a Windows phone. I've never tried it. And it doesn't work on the web, which is a bit of a failing. But they've got a huge asset there with hundreds of millions of users. If I was them, I would be thinking about what the roadmap would be for Skype to become their Trojan horse into all personal communications, one-to-one, one-to-many, and even one-to-everyone.
Toshack, what do you think?
Well, I think that's true. They don't really focus on Skype. It seems like it's been pushed to the side. It's just too powerful and too silo breaking for the rest of Microsoft, I think. But Skype, that technology was kind of an open source technology, and so the DNA is giving it out for free and using free. That's really hard for Microsoft to consume that in a way that makes sense to amplify the rest of the products. So it's I can see them sitting around saying, "Well, we don't know what to do with this, and we're really glad we have it and that we own it, but what do we do with it?" I think that's the kind of the question that comes up. They also have the competitive products with Link. I'm not sure what's in Xbox, but there's probably something that's similar to Link or Skype in Xbox. Maybe it uses one or the two. I don't have an Xbox, so I don't know.
Yeah,
And
there's over-the-top voice in Xbox.
I mean, it seems like they could tie a lot of these things together with it. They just don't.
By the way, Xbox gets delivered literally a week today. Xbox One.
Did you get it at Target?
I got mine on Amazon.
Because Target, released it, a week earlier or something.
And what are you going to do with it? You got one, right, John?
What's that?
Did you get one?
No.
Okay.
I don't know what. I'm not a gamer, so it's kind of hard. I also don't like that way that you have to pay for Netflix for some gold pass in order just to consume something that you could watch anywhere.
Right.
For free.
See, there's an interesting problem. You described that earlier this week. Well, explain it. What the gold pass? How does that work, or not?
And I might be wrong about this. It's just what I was looking at on the site when I was looking to see if maybe I should get an Xbox because I feel kind of left behind that I don't have one, and or a PlayStation. So I was just looking at them, and what do I do when on TV? It's it's usually Netflix or something that I would instead of TV. And I was looking at how you get that. You have to buy some kind of gold pass, which is their communications tool for. It's only $90 a year or something like that. But it just seems like the principle of the thing is to charge for something that's free everywhere else. I mean, this is in addition to the Netflix subscription. It's just stupid. That should just be part of the services. I mean, that's how you get network effect.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at the PlayStation. They don't have that's it's basically included, just like it is everywhere else. It's actually included on my set-top box for free. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. They've been shifting their business model left and right almost every 3 weeks in response to reaction, and that is basically you got to have an Xbox Live membership to get full access to everything. At least one member of the household has to have an Xbox Live membership, and that is there's different price points you can buy it at, but there's different levels, and it seems to me that that must mean that they're not making money or enough money from the hardware, if any at all, and that they're all on the service side, but they're trying to charge for things that other people give away for free, which is never going to work. The reason I got one is my Xbox 360, it's not mine, my kid's, broke, and it didn't seem worth replacing given the new one was coming out, so I got the new one.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many competitive products out there. Miracast on Android. There's Chromecast. There's the set-top boxes, except for Comcast. Apparently, has this stuff for free. It's included in smart TVs, which are pretty dumb, but they're there. It's just everywhere. It should be like that's the kind of thing. And I think Microsoft is trying to tie together their assets, their services assets, but. If Xbox, as one of the, I can't see who wrote it right now, but one of the commenters on the friend feed said, is more than a gaming console. Well, what is it? I mean, what do you do with it? I mean, can you do stuff with it? I don't know. It just does. It seems like it's much more geared for games, and that's why those games are so expensive on it. And EA and Activision and all the companies spend so many hundreds of millions of dollars developing games for the Xbox. It seems like that's where they're getting their revenue from.
I think what they're trying to make it is they're trying to do a lot of the things that Apple TV is going to do as well. So like you can put channels as apps on the Xbox, like ESPN is an app, or NBC is an app, or HBO is an app. And it feels as if there's a kind of a trend now with Roku and Apple TV and Xbox and Comcast, what's it called, X1 or X2, the smart TVs. The channels are becoming appified and having distribution to users. Now that distribution still relies on you subscribing on cable or satellite because all of the contracts don't allow these companies to give a signal to anyone who is not a cable or a satellite subscriber. Even as an app, you must subscribe. But the writing's on the wall there. At some point, that will no longer be true.
Well, they're competing. The Comcast and DirecTV, right? Yeah, they're competing based on this model, and the more things that get unbundled like this, yes, of course you have to pay for the bandwidth somehow. But as
No, but
for
you
example,
actually have to pay for the channels.
I understand how TV everywhere works. What I'm saying is that the it's not the game today that people are playing for. They're playing for what's about to happen, which is when these nodes become powerful enough to be able to stand on their own and start to compete directly against HBO, for example, in terms of content. And that's going to happen pretty quickly. And where's it going to happen? It's not going to be on Google Play. I mean, Google Play, for all of its value, and I'm sure there is some, they're just not in the same league as Apple or Microsoft, for that matter, if Microsoft got it together with Xbox, which is what we're talking about.
Why is Google Play not in the same league as Apple?
In terms of media? Do you think?
Yeah,
do they move?
Anything.
Are they? I mean, Amazon's got a bigger play in terms of media than Google does. They're actually in production on a number of shows.
You certainly like create media creation. Well, Google Play. I mean, if all the things around YouTube are going to come true, like they'll own the rights to the NFL and they'll own the rights to certain, the World Cup or whatever it is, YouTube is a very viable option and gives Google a really big leg up if they can fold that into play. But I don't know if they're going to do that. I mean, it just makes sense for them to do it.
It makes
they've
sense.
Already moved the Google Plus commenters into YouTube, so they're assembling their armies. You can see them all around the periphery.
But they're not doing anything with the media. And, it's easy to say that this would be a good thing if they could get the NFL. And maybe they can, pony up enough to be able to move that. But my bet is that they won't be able to do it. They're competing against the entertainment cartel. And they're going to get blocked from doing that. Hello?
Well, do you think Netflix is going to continue? I mean, they have that one show, and they had another show, which was Hemlock Grove. And, that's 1 out of 2, misses. So, or 1 out of 2 successes. And do you think they're going to continue that when their whole revenue stream is based around just subscriptions?
I think
they're going to be in the media. They're going to be just like buying up Fox or something? Or what do you think is going to happen there?
What I think is going to happen is that you have to look at the binge viewing model and see where that's going. The value of so much of what's on TV now, in real time, is moving to play later. There's a show called what's that show with James?
I agree, but the people funding the initial shows are going to get more power as binge viewing gets more popular.
That's correct.
I think it's even one step further back. I think the production companies are going to get more power because now
that's what he just said.
No, he means the people. He means the networks
producers
buying the show from the production companies. Right, John?
No.
You mean
no, the creator, the content creator.
Yeah, then I totally agree. I think channels end up being an old-fashioned word. You just end up, somebody in the chat said he'd love to have a Breaking Bad app. Well, he's going to get one. That's going to happen.
It already has happened. It's called Netflix, and it's been out for 5 years.
Quite. I mean, how would the Breaking Bad app be better than watching the show? That's
No. It's not about that. It's about who's getting the money.
Actually, it's a pretty good idea to have new shows are self-driven by customers.
Yeah, I mean, if you think
who am I going to blow up next?
Yeah, so if you think about it, Netflix and even Apple and Google are all just the same as, from the point of view of the producer, they're the same. They're just channels, distribution channels.
Yep.
Well, that's HBO's worst nightmare. This is where we get back to what Microsoft's going through and Ballmer's going through is that when they get framed, when HBO gets framed as just a direct competitor with Netflix, they're in big trouble.
Right.
And that's why they started investing more in their own shows. Showtime has Game of Thrones. Actually, HBO has Game of Thrones. Showtime has a lot of the Mafia one. Broadway. I don't even know which ones are on which show. That's how bad it's become. But they've invested in creating blockbuster shows similar to miniseries in the 70s. That's where they're going instead of being just channels. But I think the people are just going to subscribe and unsubscribe. I mean, the consumer is going to subscribe and unsubscribe as needed.
As they can, when they can do it. Right now, it's a little too difficult and time consuming to do it. But I want to finish what I was saying about what was the show with James? What's his name? On Monday. You know, the he's a criminal. Duh.
James Spader.
Yeah, thanks. That show.
Blacklist.
Yeah, that show gets.
Blacklist, something like that.
Blacklist. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. You're welcome. Blacklist gets it's growing rapidly in, there's been a 3-day window that Nielsen has been allowing or promoting as a legitimate view of a combination of live plus the next 3 days on DVR, and now they're moving to the next 7 days, right?
Right.
And the total audience over that number of shows is what is becoming the most desired advertising model for Madison Avenue. So if you take that a step further and realize that once you get to that, you get 3 or 4 of these things piled up, there's a point where you make a decision, which is, I'm not going to watch this until I get it on Netflix. And that's where Netflix's power is. So you shouldn't be. I mean, and not only that, but they send you push notifications when it becomes available. I just got one that says Dexter's now available. I don't care because,
But I think,
care.
Steve. So I think you're describing the present, but I question whether in the future you might not just get an alert from the makers of Dexter saying it's available directly from them.
The deal is the people are not going to make deals. The producers of Dexter are going to make more money from the owners of the direct, default media distribution. That's how they hold this up. HBO and Time Warner hold up a certain amount of revenue that they distribute to all the cable companies. They can then take that and do a better deal to these producers than the other producers can. So you get this sliding scale of quality and star power, whatever it is, that is interestingly now starting to get leveled together. It's becoming more of a meritocracy and much more flat in terms of the distribution of these things. And that's why, when Kevin, what's his name, Spacey, did the deal, he basically did a Kickstarter kind of deal with Netflix. And it really was, it wasn't all that significant, I don't think, for him financially for the first year, but they made 2 deals, in other words, 2 years was the deal. And his, I don't know what his points percentage is, but it's going up.
But think of it like this, okay? If you're Kevin Spacey, here's what you do. You come up with a show, or a bunch of you come up with a show, and you start pitching it around the people who will pay you to make it. So you go to Netflix, and they eventually, you do the deal with Netflix. Netflix ponies up all the upfront money needed to make the show. Then Netflix sells the show and makes revenue. Don't you think that in the future, Spacey and his crew are just going to raise money from investors and distribute the show themselves and keep all of the profit?
I think they're going to want to, but I don't think it's going to happen very quickly. I mean, this is what happened in Hollywood when the studio system broke apart. Basically, it became the agencies that were in control, and they made damn sure that this didn't happen because they wanted to keep their margins up.
But doesn't DreamWorks and Spielberg and the other one, Pixar, didn't they kind of break that mold for a while?
Maybe. But, the interesting thing about those people that you're talking about is they don't really show up in the binge viewing model. I mean, where's Spielberg in television?
But it's got to come. Are any of you guys watching Homeland on Showtime?
Sure.
So it's frustrating as hell because the only place you can watch it is on Showtime, and therefore you got to wait.
You can't buy it on iTunes.
It's not on iTunes. It's not on Netflix.
You can't download it. They've really got, and you know who does that? the smartest man in television. You know, the guy who's married to, what's her name? Chen. Les Moonves, thanks.
Oh.
I only see things as, the guy who's married to the host of Big Brother.
Who owns Showtime? Is that
that's where my priorities are.
Who owns Showtime?
CBS.
CBS. Okay, yeah. Well, so there you go.
So part of the thing is that they're trying to move towards this. Oh, you may have seen this within 3 days thing, but taking the James Spader show as an example, I had no idea that was on until I randomly saw an episode and it was like, oh, there are 7 episodes that have already happened, so I have to go back and get those from somewhere. So I have to see if my cable company has them, or see if I can download them from somewhere on the net, or find them somewhere else. And that sort of rationing behavior that they have, that assumption that these things only exist in Windows, actually damages the market for what they're trying to sell.
It doesn't damage it. This is, how do they think that the people sell heroin? This is drugs that are being sold to people.
It works. It works.
You get them addicted, and then you provide less and less friction in them being able to get it over time.
Of course, but they're not. But that's not. That's not what Nielsen is doing. That's the ratings that are being used to decide whether they recommission that series are not counting my viewings, because I had to do them through some way that's not being measured because they weren't available.
I didn't understand what you just said.
So. I couldn't find whatever that show was on demand on my thing, so I went and torrented it so I could watch the previous 4 episodes and work out what the hell the backstory was. Because it doesn't make much sense if you come on episode 5 with that. It's like James Spader is working for the FBI in some weird way. It's like,
well, actually, since I've watched every minute of it, it turns out that it's easier to watch it backwards. But that's all right.
By the way, is it any good? Because I'm not watching.
I love it. I actually love it. It's weird. And
It's sort of
it's
interesting.
a Breaking Bad
conspiracy
antidote, basically.
Yeah, it's more like X-Files, the Alias. We're taking down criminals, and James Spader knows all the criminals. It's kind of odd.
He is all the criminals. I mean, literally,
Yes.
It twists the notion of who's good and who's. Game of Thrones. I'm being inexorably drawn into watching the first episode of Game of Thrones. I'm being dragged toward it.
It's fantastic.
My fantasy, fantasy blockade is faltering.
I've
been told that it's a model of corporate life.
It's only 20% fantasy. The rest is
corporate
a retelling of the 100 Years' War, which Kevin knows all about, and maybe Keith does too.
No, those of us raised in the UK cannot watch anything that even feels like the Round Table and the Knights and all of that shit.
Why?
It's not like that at all.
I watched those. Those are fun.
What's wrong with
I've watched all the Arthur Myth things.
You mean it's not true? There is no Santa Claus?
No, it's just that you grow up hating it because you're forced to watch it the whole time. Robin Hood, it's the whole thing. I can't watch it. Witches, wizards, Merlin.
Yeah, see, I'm with you on witches and wizards. I don't care.
I enjoyed.
There's no data
these
support
Arthurian
that. Or zombies.
Merlin, and what's the other one? There was the other one with. There was another Arthur. There's Merlin, which is like comedy camp.
Excalibur was good.
Yeah.
And then there's another TV series that was an Arthur Mythos one that actually worked quite well. That had some darker bits to it and better casting. But
the
Game
Myth
of
Jason is brought to you by.
Is drawing on that thread and doing much more complicated and deep things with it. And the fact they're actually able to convey that kind of complexity in a TV series is part of what's impressive about it. It's more complex than like sort of great classic BBC TV series like I, Claudius, because it's able to assume that you can watch it multiple times and catch up, or do the if you get into it, you can follow all the parts, and so it's able to do this very deep and complex storytelling that was very hard to do previously.
So just to return to the side conversation that we diverted from the bomber conversation due to the protesting from the anti-Microsoft discussion crowd. So,
we're reviewing TV now.
well, absolutely. I've been trying to do this for years.
Well, actually, the other, you just
The Game of Thrones is actually a retelling of the Balmer saga.
There you go. You see?
There we go.
Guido, are you paying attention?
No, it's actually more like hatching Twitter. Have you guys read that yet?
Keith, you just disappeared.
Oh, did I? I shared something and it obviously isn't working. I'll stop sharing it.
But now there you go. Congratulations. What were you sharing? Now you're locked up, of course.
No.
Do me a favor. Don't do that the next time.
Am I still locked up?
Yeah.
What were you saying about Skype, Keith?
So what I was sharing actually was a Henry Blodgett slide from this week. The title is "Mobile is the only media time that's growing," and it shows how TV time has declined over the last 4 years, but just marginally. But online time declined last year for the first time by 20%. That is to say, non-mobile online time. Radio declined, print declined, everything else declined, but mobile went up to now be 20% of all media time consumed, compared with TV, which is 38% of all media time consumed. Online 20%, radio 12%, and print 4%. So he's making the point that for the first time, actually, mobile is denting TV.
Okay, I'm just going to call you right back just to see if I can unfreeze you. Discuss, please.
Well, so that's a somewhat arbitrary category because mobile isn't distinct from online most of the time. So saying, oh, you're either mobile or you're online at a desktop machine in a web browser or whatever the hell that is measuring is missing the point, because the point of mobile is that you are online all over the place. So that's a slightly spurious distinction, and I suspect that's a distinction that gets less clear over time as the mobile experience becomes as high res and as clear and as fast.
I'm telling you, last week there was a Jimi Hendrix documentary that was released on public television, and somehow I first heard about it the day after it was released, and so I despaired. I went and looked. I knew it wouldn't be there. It wasn't. Then the next day, Jason Hirschhorn's Media Redef newsletter had a link to it. So the good news gets even better. There it is. I figured it's going to be excerpts or something like that. No, it's the whole thing. And not only is that, but I click on the AirPlay button on the iPad Air, and boom, it goes up to the Apple TV, goes up to the big screen in HD.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And
nice.
They're getting smarter with the most recent build of Apple TV, and they're stealing a page from Chromecast, which is that once it gets up there, they're pulling it directly from the URL, not from or the URI, I guess.
But Ken's point is I don't think it's right. And I'm thinking more with a marketer hat on here. Where someone consumes something is a really important part of how you package a product and position a product. And the fact that mobile is the device that people are using when they're consuming media will have a whole lot of implications for how you package and deliver media. And a web browser will suffer because of that as the primary packaging mechanism.
Do you disagree? I agree with that. Kevin, do you agree?
No, I think we can go back and forth on that.
Yeah, I want to go back to web browser suffering. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
No, I don't think. But I think that was so. The thing I said when Keith was slightly offline was that mobile, as distinct from online, is a spurious distinction because most of mobile is online too, and it's just the center of gravity is shifting. But big chunks of that are in web-like consumption things, whether they are Facebook or the browser. Facebook is a web-like consumption medium even on mobile. Now they're trying to change that. They're trying to change that by shipping Messenger and trying to catch up with all the other point-to-point communications that's been picking up on there too. But there's I suspect the bucketing in that graph is missing the point a fair bit.
Okay, I just want to sneak in a reference to Snapchat since our producer has insisted on us talking about that. Worth $3 billion? Yes, no.
And Snapchat should sell for sure. I mean, it's interesting. Facebook is giving away a lot of its problems by even making the offer, because where does it all end? Because those are
another two of those. They've got $9 billion in cash, so if they give away $3 billion, then they got $6 billion in cash.
And not only another two, then there'll be three more after that. I mean, it's basically the inability to have a centralized social network in a distributed mobile world. And in that distributed mobile world, whack-a-mole is the only game you can play if you want to try to own the audience. And that's what they're doing. They're playing whack-a-mole. And it seems hard to be Facebook. I mean, I'm not really against them in any way. I just wonder what would be a rational way to play the game and whether this is a rational way to play the game. But I don't see that they really have any...
Okay, but I didn't ask that question. I asked whether or not it's worth $3 billion. John Tajek, is it worth $3 billion?
No way. It's a feature. It used to be out in, it used to be an email feature in the .com days. I mean, $3 billion for a thing that just deletes whatever you send right away? I think that's vastly overrated. However, it's extremely popular, and they're paying for popularity.
Vastly overrated, except by people younger than about 14.
But people who are competing with it. That's the thing.
There's no value. The value is.
Be careful.
What? The value is ephemeral.
It's the value
by definitionally.
Well, so the question is Facebook
the instantly disappearing audience? You buy it and then the audience disappears.
But again, Jason Hirschhorn is onto something. He said something, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I'll try and say what he says. He has this newsletter, which is great. Everybody should download it. And at the top, he has like these little Snapchats about stuff. I saw this and it sucked. I like this. And he made the point that, and again, I'm not going to say it elegantly, but he made the point that everybody's looking for a private Twitter. Now, is Snapchat worth any $3 billion as a private Twitter? I think it's a really good question.
I don't think it really is a private Twitter, and
the way my daughter uses it sure as hell is.
WhatsApp is a better private Twitter. WhatsApp really is a private Twitter. You can have chats with groups with anyone you want.
No, what I'm saying is what does Twitter do? And I mean, kids are starting to use Twitter more than they used to.
Twitter's a broadcasting or publishing platform from the point of view of the writer.
And it's basically, you say, I think that sucks. That's a tweet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Snapchat is, you're ugly.
Yeah, it's a bullying tool.
Right.
That's what the end result in the Lord of the Flies context would be.
But then you get
master evolves into
Snapchat,
a tool for insults that can't be captured anywhere, or you can't be implied or implicitly or explicitly declared guilty. And I think that's an abomination of what the internet should be. But I'm somewhat of an idealist on this.
I guess so. Jeez.
Yeah, the things these kids are doing.
It's the proprietary police. Propriety.
This is back to the Steve Ballmer point. John's from a different era.
I see it. I totally reject it. I think that John has just made the point that we are all children at heart, and kids say the darndest things about other kids, and it hurts.
As Jimmy Kimmel found out, I mean, it's just stupid that that we can do this without any recourse. I mean, we're all going to do it, and I think it's a mistake.
So it is.
I was going to say,
$3 billion. We're all going to do it. $3 billion? Question mark.
No, there's no value on that. there's no value on. What do you? Can you advertise on it? You can put an instant subliminal advertisement on that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to push something into someone's face like, hey, you know, eat this hamburger, or we're gonna blackmail you? Oh, deleted. There's no value if there's no history.
No,
hamburger
here's the value.
The value is
hamburger blackmail.
there are similar things to Snapchat in the Japanese and Chinese markets that actually do charge monthly fees. So be able to migrate to something like that would make sense for them. And that's,
no one's going to use that after they start charging. That was the ephemeral part that I was mentioning.
I think if you can imagine Facebook as the burgers of Amsterdam, putting their finger in the holes to stop the water leaking into the city, there's value in survival. And what Facebook are doing is saying these guys are threatening to us big time, because it's now about 10 times bigger than Instagram was when they acquired Instagram, measured by the volume of posts.
Well, that's true. Facebook has an issue with, they already have the world. What else can they do to stop the world from moving away? And that would be why they're interested in it. But that's $3 billion, where they walked away from that. There's nobody else besides Facebook who would do it.
Yeah, so if 3 billion can preserve 100,
Twitter.
It's cheap.
I think it's dangerous to Twitter. I think the Twitter will buy them.
No, well, I don't think they'd sell to Twitter either. I think.
Twitter is the one that doesn't sell.
But
But guess what? They're a public company now.
Well,
That was last year when they wouldn't sell.
No. Twitter. I say Snapchat wouldn't sell to Twitter. I don't think Twitter can make
I know
them
what you're
offer
saying. I'm just taking a sort of a
You're just-
Uber
okay.
view.
You're
I'm
saying the
taking
opposite
a
of what I'm saying to
bomber
confuse me.
perspective from the
the
old
rumor
world.
this morning is that Google's bid 4 billion.
See, I didn't even know that, and I'm right.
But I do think it's negative bidding to destroy something that's threatening. I don't think it's seeing value in the asset as seeing negative value in the asset existing.
Well, that's why they bought Instagram, and it's turning out to be the tail that's eating the animal.
Yeah,
Instagram is wildly successful.
My kids are all on Instagram
That's right.
now.
And
but it's less successful than Facebook Photos. Facebook Photos is still huge, and the threat from them from Snapchat was that it was, at least on some of the charts I was seeing this week, it's of a similar volume to Facebook Photos, for that core young user base, because they've realized they don't actually want the photos hanging around forever when they're just being silly with each other.
It's an aristocracy. The kids think it's the most important channel that there is, and they're probably right. I agree. It's not worth $3 billion. It's probably worth $10 billion.
It's also true that
Good financial advice, Steve.
Yeah. Do not listen to what I'm saying.
They turned down $3 billion, obviously, because they had something else in mind. I mean, they must not be clueless about this.
No, they turned down $3 billion because Mark turned down
it's the easiest way to get on the cover of Time magazine
at future time periods. And that's why they're looking to do this. Snapchat's not dumb about this, but Facebook and Google might be.
They did it because Twitter finally went IPO and validated the entire market, and they're just pinging themselves at a certain level from which they can operate, raise a lot of money a la Twitter, and then go public.
Well, they just raised $80 million from IVP and General Catalyst. Jeremy Liu from Benchmark, from Lightspeed was their first investor. He's a smart guy. He used to be the chief of staff at AOL many moons ago when Jonathan Miller was there. These guys will be telling them not to sell because these guys are very plugged in and they'll know what the demand is from other people. And they will smell that the real price is much higher. They may delude themselves into thinking that Snapchat could morph into a fully fledged social network on mobile that will replace Facebook, but I doubt it. I think they're just trying to get the price optimized.
Okay. Well, we got some value out of that.
So, I mean...
Seriously.
Yeah. I want to loop back a bit there. So one of the things you were saying about TV going more on demand and less live is that Twitter is the countervailing example of that because of the ability to do stuff live. So this week, The Voice used Twitter to have a live vote on air to see who should be sent home and who shouldn't. So they're explicitly using Twitter to displace the telephone voting that they've had for years. So that was interesting.
I think they should send
Speaking
the
of
judges
Andy
home.
Kaufman.
Andy Kaufman. Explain.
Andy Kaufman, when he was on Saturday Night Live, had a vote that he...
That's right, which he lost.
That to vote him on or off the Saturday Night Live, and the fans voted him off, and he left.
And his career
And
collapsed.
now he just resurfaced as possibly being alive by a fake actress posing as his daughter. Snap.
Be careful what you vote for.
Did that just disappear? I didn't get the snap thing. Oh, you mean
He
you
disappeared.
win? Is that what that means?
That was a 1990s term when it said, "Oh, snap." People used to say it.
I
It was a thing back then.
Well, I once sat an entire day in the office of a friend of mine who was at Universal, while next door, Andy Kaufman pretended to be that guy. What was his name?
Latka,
No.
the Saturday Night Live guy.
No. It was, he had an alternate personality that he would basically submerge himself into.
More, Robin Williams sounds like.
No. Well, people who know Andy Kaufman trivia will know what I'm talking about. But I knew this, so I sat there and pretended to listen to my friend and watched him never go out of character for an entire business day. I had a lot of free time in those days. Andy Kaufman was amazing.
Tony Clifton.
That's it, Tony Clifton.
So, Steve, there's a lot of demand in the chat session for us to just briefly talk about Coin. Did you guys buy Coin? I bought 2 of them.
I'm staying as far away from that as I possibly can. Anybody else have a differing opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a daft idea. It's saying, "Oh, let's put all my credit cards into a single point of failure with a battery that fails and stops working if your phone battery fails." It's like, no, thank you. I'll stick with magnetic stripes, thanks. I've got, if I want stuff in my phone, I've got Google Wallet, and it does that plenty well, and it works with Tap to Pay, which actually works somewhere other than the US.
How does Verizon block Google Wallet? I mean, what's their problem?
Who knows? Because they're daft monopolists who aren't very good at what they're doing.
Yeah, but they stop, supposedly viral monopolists who do know what they're doing.
You notice the understated...
Just a reason for not buying Verizon devices. That's what it comes down to me.
I love Kevin's understated British insults. The daft monopolists.
Sounds like a group, doesn't it? Hey, the daft monopolists are in town.
Sounds like a title for the show.
I like that one. Actually, that's better than the last one that was pretty good.
I mean, have you chaps tried Wallet on Android?
What's
It's actually
Android?
pretty good.
But what do you do? I don't know what to do with it. I use it for paying for things sometimes online on the web, but I've never used it on my mobile.
Well, it works. It works as Tap to Pay. So if they've got a Tap to Pay thing, you just tap your phone and it pays it.
Never used
And
it.
that's it depends on the point of sale having one of those. But if it does, then it is exactly the Coin use case, except you don't have to swipe anything.
Is this a Square competitor?
Kind of. Square's the other way around. Square is working for the merchant side out. So Square is like, we will make it easy for the merchants to take this instead of buying gigantic point of sale terminals. Whereas Google Wallet is saying, okay, we'll work with the existing point of sale terminals if you tap them. They could probably make them interoperate if they wanted to. But there is Tap to Pay is a multi-year industry thing that they're trying to push through in the payment space. So if you go to a lot of cafes and restaurants and shops, you'll see little Tap to Pay logos there. It looks like a Wi-Fi RSS feed type icon on the top of the thing. And if you tap, if you got the right kind of credit card, you can tap and it'll pay. Like my UK bank gave me one that has Tap to Pay built in. It's got a little. So I can get this the right way up.
Show us your number.
Yeah, I'm skewing that. Don't worry.
Yeah, I see your.
It's got a little thing that looks like a Wi-Fi symbol. That
It's,
means that I can tap to pay with this.
Oh.
And similarly, I can tap to pay with my phone. But the Google Wallet one has virtual. Will either route to whichever credit card I want after I've given it credit cards, or it can make up a credit card that will route to my Google account if I'm using my Google.
So, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, the reason Coin, assuming that your battery concerns are not real, that in other words that it has a very long battery life, which it probably does, because I carry around one of these Citibank double factor authentication things, and it never runs out of battery. So I'm going to assume they've done something like that. Assuming that's not a concern, the reason it's better is it doesn't involve any new infrastructure. It just uses the existing credit card infrastructure, and it is nice to reduce your wallet down to one thing. You got to admit, I would love to do that.
No, it's not a problem. It's not something I have a problem with. And if it was a problem, I've got Google Wallet on these two things, so I can tap with either of these. So I've got battery backup between them, and it works. So
how many endpoints actually have it?
Millions. I don't know.
What? Stores?
Yeah, Starbucks, Macy's, Pete's, more chain stores than mum and pop shops. And overseas, it's fairly big. You see it in the UK quite a lot.
Wallet you're talking about?
I'm talking about the tap to pay. The thing that's on my UK.
Yeah, I see it a lot more now.
I mean, the American cards don't even have chip and pin. Well, I've got a chip and pin, but on my American credit card, but it doesn't actually work. When you put it in a chip and pin machine, it goes what and prints out a thing for me to sign. So
is it basically NFC, Kevin?
Yeah. The tap to pay stuff is NFC. Yeah, actually that's true. I wonder if I can read this from my NFC reader. I haven't tried that.
Kevin's got distracted.
He's trying to pay himself. What?
I'm trying to see if I can.
Here you are. Thank you very much.
If I can read my credit card with my phone, but apparently not.
Really? I'm worth that much? Wow. Thanks.
Well, no, I had that problem with I put my phone in my pocket with my wallet, and it starts reading my my Clipper Caltrain card, because it says, "Oh, you've got 945 on your Clipper card." So I've got to make sure I put it in a different pocket.
That's the problem of JSON in the wild.
So all these things that Steve Ballmer is too old to get.
Shame.
Yeah. Okay. Once around the table and we're out of here.
Who are you going to start with?
You. There we go.
With me. Well, I'd just like to
instantaneous.
I'd like to finish where I started. Ukraine 2, France 0. Greece 3, wow. Romania 1. Portugal 1. Sweden 0. France are in deep trouble. They might not make the World Cup, which would, by the way, be a good thing for the French, because they always go to the World Cup and then they start fighting with each other and having strikes amongst the players. So this is probably good for France, because they won't have to go through the heartache of disastrous failure.
Right.
England should do the same.
Probably,
what?
But England made it by beating Montenegro or someone like that. I think it was Montenegro. Yeah. And it was like a national triumph that England managed to beat little Montenegro.
Well, it's a problem that England has to split up between Ireland and Scotland and all these other countries instead of just being one gigantic conglomerate, nation. And it's also too bad that they import almost all their players into the Premier League so they can't actually hone good players over time. But that's a fundamental flaw with the English system.
John, you just displayed the utmost amazing ignorance of the history of British colonialism.
It's not. It's knowledgeable ignorance.
Yes.
See, there's another good name. Knowledgeable ignorance.
Military
ignorance. Intelligence.
It's no. The first part is definitely just to rub it in your soul. The second part is somewhat true. Is that the Premier League brings in all these other players from all around the world in order to get the Premier League, ratings and things. But then where are the English players? Where do they go?
There's this whole debate in England, which is basically nationalistic in its core, saying that the England team suffers because of all the foreigners playing in the Premier League. And the truth is that is calling the symptom the cause. The reason there's lots of foreigners in the Premier League is because they're better. And the English players aren't good enough to make more than the proportion of the teams that they actually do. Well, once you have a free market, quality kind of rises to the surface. By the way, you should know
they only need 40 players. They can't get 40 players. Only 11 on a field. They can't get 11 people who are superstars out of England.
No, it's 20 teams. There's 20 teams in the.
Only 11 on a field at a time, right? You have to have the subs, but come on,
20 teams.
That's all they need. 20.
No, there's 20 teams. 20 teams, each with 11 players.
Right, so but the World Cup team is one team.
Oh, the World Cup team. No, they've got decent players.
And they lose every game. There's a great book called
Why England Loses.
Why England Loses, yeah.
Soccernomics. It's called.
Is that the name?
Which where I get my educated ignorance from.
You've got to have a beer and discuss Soccernomics. That's the book. It's called Soccernomics. By the way, England did lose 2-0 to Chile today in England.
Yeah, the problem with all of this discussion is you'd have to actually like soccer in order to be interested in this. But it sounds fascinating. How do I get in?
Have the Yankees play the English team.
That would the Yankees is the reason that you can't just buy 40 good players.
Is that a baseball team?
You can, and then you still lose.
I think they were named by England, actually.
The Pinstripes? Were the Pinstripes on Wall Street first, or were they in London's, whatever that street is?
Savile Row.
Yeah. I was looking for an answer.
I have no idea.
There's two Brits and one adopted Brit here.
I am not a costume historian.
Okay, so I think that was Kevin's turn.
Well, so I was going to say that actually the news today is Turnbull Club's final test, but that then we're getting into even more pure sport, which is cricket. So, and I know nothing about sport really at all. So I'm sure.
And it's the Rugby World Cup, Kevin.
Well, exactly.
This portion of the show can be used as a sleep aid. How about
why are we
a nod either at television or Guido Hoffman or?
Well, so
he just fell out of his bed.
This is my blind spot, which is that I don't really care about sport at all. So I see no reason for live television to exist, and that was why Twitter. Saying, oh well, if you follow the hashtags along while the show's on, then we can all laugh at it together. Was actually a revelation to me as for why live television should exist, and it works better in the UK than it does here, because the problem you have here is everyone's like, oh, do you see what happened in Scandal? It's like, no, I didn't see what happened in Scandal because it's not on this coast yet. Shut up. So that's problematic. But for actual sporting events or for these contest things like The Voice, it does make more. It does give you a reason to watch it live rather than not.
Well, I'm looking forward to the day that I can just watch it on my iPad, which I can then re-divert back up to the TV at the time that I want to watch it, which is like when everybody on the East Coast does.
Right. Yeah. The way you do that now is you have to buy satellite TV, and then you can get the East Coast channels too.
No, I think they stopped that. Can you get DirecTV? Can you get East Coast channels, John?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Really?
Well, they
sometimes they block them based on the
zip code.
You can definitely get them. We can get ABC East. We can get the different markets. It's just it really depends on your setup. People in rural areas get any channel, and people in the West Coast, they sometimes block it because of relationship they already have.
But usually for sports stuff. They won't do that for watching Scandal 3 hours early.
Okay, John, summary?
Well, I've said enough.
Yeah, that's never stopped you before.
Well, there's interesting market share data came out that's 81% of phones that are sold Android. And then, of course, the alternative view is all the money still goes to Apple. And then there was another alternative view, which said that those 81% of Android phones are actually just dumb phones. That's always interesting.
Fantastic.
But it's the same every year. It's going to go up continue to go on that path until Apple is rich and Samsung's rich and Microsoft gets a couple bucks for every Android phone, which is why their stock price goes up.
Wow, it's kind of like an alternate Gilmore Gang,
well,
compressed.
The Moto G was this week as well. That was interesting.
The what?
Do you see that one? This is Motorola's latest low-end phone that's like under $200, unlocked, off contract, which means you can use it, with any GSM thing. So it's like the lower-end version of the Moto X, but it's actually quite a nice phone, but at a very reasonable price. And that's after wherever it's. I put my phone. This one's $350. Whereas the one they've just shipped is under $200. So they're like moving that price point down quite a lot. Now, obviously, you can still get cheaper Android phones from off-label ones from China or whatever. But the fact that they're making price points there and they're explicitly making them unlocked off contract is getting interesting. So that's something
that's a good topic to cover. Lock and unlocked phones. I hate being locked into that Verizon contract.
Yeah, the FCC, the new commissioner, basically said that everybody needs to unlock their phones. He's talking to the carriers. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen.
I've got to go. I've got a call, so I'll call you later, Steve.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, John. Let me start with thanks to Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without which we wouldn't be doing this. Thanks to NewTek and their incredible TriCaster, and the even more incredible TriCaster that is sitting in a box over there. That we're going to hopefully find there's a holiday, but not until Dreamforce happens next week. Anybody who's within sound of our voices, please come to Dreamforce. It's going to be amazing in San Francisco. Pretty much going to lock out from Howard to between 3rd and 6th Street and all the hotels. It's going to be amazing. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gilmore. There it is. I want to thank John Toshak, who just left. I want to thank Kevin Marks. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
I want to thank Keith Tier. Fantastic job.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank the chat room as always. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. Keep up the good work. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.